we indulge in discussions around our energy sector. Father, we receive grace and wisdom and insight, understanding, that today we shall have a very productive discussion and meeting. Everything that we need to have this successful program this evening, we receive it from you. We thank you already, knowing that whatever we ask you for, you hear us and you answer us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Linda. There are many dignitaries here today, and I want to acknowledge a few. In our midst today is Dr. Jima Manunu, a good friend of mine, the board chair of ASEP. Thank you, madam, for coming. Also with us is Dr. Ampofo, is the chairman of the Energy Commission. Doc, if you're here, let's acknowledge your presence. Thank you, sir, for coming. Dr. Haji is the head of research with the National Democratic Congress and is here with us. Doc, thank you also for coming. Doc Asansa is with the GOGIG program, the Ghana Oil and Gas for Inclusive Growth, and she's also here with us. Docus, let's acknowledge your presence. Thank you for coming. Before we even start with anything else, let me quickly now invite our panelists. And this really is a crack team of experts who know their field very well. One of them, you may not know, have a relationship with because he's my boss. He's the founder of the Africa Precious Minerals Limited. He's the principal of the Triton Group Limited. He served as the chief executive of the Water Authority. He served as the managing director, strategic planning and new business development of the Ashanti Gold Fields Company Limited. Served as a manager of business planning and analysis for Kaiser Aluminium and Chemical Corporation in Pleasanton, California, where he served for 8 years. He trained as an electrical engineer and has worked for GE, RCA, as well as ITT, both in the USA. He serves as a chairman of, if I was going to say this, I'll probably let the cat out of the bag too early. He's the board chair of Orange Group Ghana. He serves as a director of Stanbic Bank Ghana Limited. Has a degree from Yale University, an MBA from Stanford's Graduate School of Business. And now let me let the cat out of the bag now. He is the chairman of the Multimedia Group Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, with a big round of applause, Mr. Kwekwa Wache. A round of applause for him. This round of applause is not big enough. If you want my salary to be increased, you probably need to give a bigger one. A big one, please. Thank you, Mr. Wache, for coming. Also with us today, another friend of mine. Not my boss, but a friend, nonetheless. The Deputy Director of Africa, to date, since 2008, of the Natural Resource Governance Institute, a non-partisan international policy research and advocacy organization which helps people benefit from their country's oil, gas, and mineral wealth by promoting accountable and effective resource governance. He is currently responsible for strategic leadership, management, and coordination with respect to the Africa portfolio and the Ghana Regional Office, supporting projects in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, Mozambique, and Niger. He's a big man. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for Emmanuel Kuyole. Join us tonight as another expert in his field. Emmanuel, thank you for coming. Another man who I won't say is a friend, is an acquaintance. I've met him at many programs because of my penchant to be hosting and participating in these programs as far as oil and gas is concerned. He's executive director of the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment, KITE, a leading policy research and advocacy non-governmental organization working in the energy, environment, and technology sectors. Has over 17 years research and working experience in the energy, environment, and technology sectors. In the early 2000s, he researched focused on the impact of the energy sector reforms on the poor and how public benefits such as energy access, energy efficiency, renewable energy technology, and environmental protection could be preserved as the electricity sector of developing countries were being reformed. Recently, however, his research works are focused on how Ghana can maximize the benefit from its emerging oil and gas industry, while at the same maximizing the undesirable minimizing rather, the undesirable negative effects of the same. Again, and a big round of applause. Let's welcome Ishmael Ajikumhine, the Executive Director of Kite. Thank you, Ishmael, for joining us here on this all-important program. And again, we are live on Joy 99.7 FM, live on the Joy News channel on Multi-TV. I'd now like to welcome for very brief comments, because we have in our midst this evening, Honorable Professor John Nabila, who is the President of the National House of Chiefs. Ladies and gentlemen, with a standing ovation, I want to welcome you and give us a brief remarks as we start. You want to help us or set us off, Prof? Thank you very much. A standing ovation and a welcome to Prof. Okay, Prof, I will approach you.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm told the board chair is here of this organization. I think it's good that we're going to discuss this because the energy sector is very important. And it's good we have clear ideas of this sector for all the political parties. And in the first place, we were able to discuss without any rancor in this room. We believe that they also receive our suggestions without any ill feeling. Secondly, as we look forward to the general elections, I can only, on behalf of the National House of Chiefs, appeal to everybody to let us have this seventh time elections peacefully as we've done in the past. Ghana is a showcase, and we must continue to be so. The we are hearing here and there should not go on. So we pray, and I'm here with Nungua Manche, two of us representing the National House of Chiefs. And so we hope that we'll have very fruitful, peaceful elections. And the campaign will be very peaceful. So before and during and after the elections, Ghana will still be at the top of the democratic ladder in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nabila. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the words of wisdom and setting us off on a peaceful note. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam. He's the Executive Director with the Africa Center for Policy. He has a brief welcome address. He will set the tone and explain why we're here. And that, in fact, will set us off into the main conversation with a panel of experts. Another round of applause for Dr. Amin Adam.
Thank you very much, Evans. Professor Nabila, Nananum, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media fraternity, I would like to welcome you all to this evening's program. We invited you to join hands with us to scrutinize the energy sector promises of our political parties. This is the third in a series of activities we are implementing to bring focus to our energy and petroleum sector in this year's general elections and to help broaden the frontiers of Ghana's democracy through issue-based political campaigning. And let me take this opportunity to thank you all for accepting our invitation. The energy and petroleum sector is so crucial to our development as a country. It is the fuel for the engine of economic growth. It is so critical that the development programs of our parties, which they have presented to Ghanaians, will remain on paper if they are unable to provide enough energy for our short and long-term development needs. Our desire to bring focus to the energy sector in this election is further informed by our belief that the energy sector outlook from 2017 presents significant levels of uncertainty, and political parties must clearly demonstrate how they intend to confront them. Jubilee production suffered this year as a result of the problem with the turret on which the FPSO Kwame Nkrumah is anchored. But with 10 production expected to peak in the first quarter of 2017, and first oil from Sankofa expected also in 2017, oil production is projected to reach 200,000 barrels a day. This is good news. And so if crude oil prices remain at current levels or even better, Ghana will be making additional revenue from oil to provide fiscal relief for our economy. But given the resource constraints in our country against competing development needs, the citizens of Ghana must scrutinize the manifesto promises of the parties to determine which party has the best policy for managing and maximizing the use of our oil revenue as a development opportunity. Unfortunately, beyond the projected oil production from the producing and development fields, we are likely not to add significant levels of production for a long while, although most of our producing fields would have entered their natural decline phase. Therefore, we need to be able to increase investments in the upstream oil and gas sector. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ghanaians, therefore, must scrutinize again how the political parties intend to attract investments to the upstream oil and gas sector, increase production, and sustain our emerging oil and gas industry. The power sector has its own uncertainty, largely due to unreliable supply of gas from Nigeria, likely suspension of indigenous gas supply due to planned repairs on the turret of the FPSO, and the increasing indebtedness of the utility companies, as well as lack of reserve margin. Also, history has shown that anytime we are told the power crisis is over, it returns some years later. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we must interrogate the manifestos of the political parties on how they intend to fix the power challenges permanently. These and many other reasons are why ASEP, with support from GOGIC and Oxfam, embarked on the Citizens Energy Manifesto program, particularly this evening's expert panel discussion on the energy programs of our parties. We are grateful to you, GOGIC and Oxfam, for your continuing support to our work. Ladies and gentlemen, we began the Citizens Energy Manifesto program with citizens' consultations on their priorities for the energy and petroleum sector, based on which we produced and launched the Citizens Energy Manifesto. The manifesto was shared widely to the political parties, including the NDC, MPP, CPP, PPP, and PNC. And later, at a request by APC, we also sent them a copy of the Citizens Energy Manifesto. Ladies and gentlemen, at the time we launched the manifesto, the political parties were still preparing their party manifesto. And we believe they were also consulting with citizens and various stakeholders on what policies they present to Ghanaians. It is therefore not surprising to us that most of the promises, policies, and programs they articulated in their manifesto are generally consistent with the Citizens' Energy Manifesto. This shows that our political parties are truly responding to the aspirations and priorities of our citizens. We also just yesterday launched the Energy Manifesto Monitor, which highlights the promises made by the parties and benchmark them against the Citizens' Energy Manifesto. And I believe most of you here have copies of the monitor. Our analysis of the issues addressed by the parties and the policies and programs they presented to Ghanaians shows, however, that there is significant level of consensus among our parties on how they intend to address the challenges of the energy and petroleum sector. For example, out of a total of 28 policies and programs proposed by the parties for the oil and gas sector, they have consensus on more than 10 of the policies and programs. Similarly, of a total of 27 power sector policies and programs proposed by the parties again agree on about 14 of the policies and programs. Ladies and gentlemen, as expected, the parties also have policy differences. For example, they articulated 16 unique oil and gas policies and programs and 15 for the power sector. And I'd like to note some of the policy differences for our attention. The parties agreed to create an enabling environment to attract investment to the oil and gas sector. How they will do this, they differ. They agreed to increase local content participation and value addition. How they will achieve this, they differ. They agreed to fight corruption and rent-seeking behavior in the oil and gas sector. They differ on how to do this. They also agree to invest our oil money in pro-poor development, but they disagree on the choice of the priority sectors. They agree to improve on transparency in the management of oil and gas resources, but again, they have different approaches to achieving this. Similarly, ladies and gentlemen, there are policy differences among the parties on the power sector. Apart from the conventional sources of power generation in Ghana, which all the parties agreed to continue with, as far as increasing generation capacity is concerned, they seek to introduce new generation sources. For example, the NDC is promising to add coal power to the generation mix. MPP wants to add geothermal and tidal sources, and CPP wants to add nuclear power. All these are very important contesting policy positions based on which the parties are expressing their resolve to solving the problems on the energy and petroleum sector of our country. And we would like to laud them and commend them for their interest in governing our country and in providing leadership through such policies and programs. Ladies and gentlemen, whether these policies are visible and can be effective in addressing the challenges will be the subject matter of this evening's expert panel. We have assembled very accomplished professionals and experts to lead us in discussing what the parties have presented as solutions for the development of the energy and petroleum sector of our country. This program, as we are told, is also carried live on TV and radio to encourage participation by many voters beyond the walls of this room. It is our hope that the Citizens Energy Manifesto program will achieve the intended objective: to provide education and information to the voters, support them in making the right choices, and to empower them to hold our political parties accountable to their manifesto promises during and after elections. We believe that with these kinds of engagements, we can move our politics to issue-based politics, in which there will be contests of ideas, rather than the politics of insults and name-calling. which often characterize our politics. Indeed, monitoring the US elections, I now understand that we can have more insulting politics elsewhere. But this is no excuse, ladies and gentlemen, for us to descend to that level. We can lift our politics up and teach the Americans how to do decent politics. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me once again welcome you all to the expert panel on the energy manifestos of Ghana's political parties for the 2016 presidential and parliamentary elections. And I wish you, our experts, very fruitful discussions, and to all of us, as somebody said, very fruitful listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doc. So, we're going to have, it's now 5:20. We have the next 40 minutes. We're going to use that to explore the issues. We're hoping that we'll end by 6:30 so we can have an audience interaction. I've seen the political parties here to react to what they hear the expert panel say on the many issues that have been captured in their manifestos. So there'll be time for audience engagement and questions and reactions to what you hear from the audience. We'll start from the general to the specific. I'll start with Mr. Kuyole. Give me your general reaction to what you've read in the manifestos so far, as far as oil and gas and power is concerned. What for you? I want it to be as open as possible. You take it where you want to take it, but give me your general reaction to what you've read so far. You know the current challenges. These documents have been fashioned targeting challenges that exist currently. Do you see a match? Are these proposals addressing these challenges in an effective, sustainable manner?
Thank you very much, and thank you all also. I think my initial comments will be to first thank the political parties for putting out this document, because I know it's taken a lot of time and effort to pull them together. But having the manifestos are a good way to give the population or the citizens of Ghana an idea of some of the policy thoughts that they have. And of course, to help discussions like this. And having gone through quickly, what I can say is that I think generally the key policy issues have been mentioned. Of course, we go into the specifics to look at the feasibility of some of those proposals, and also to see whether they address the specific challenges that we face now, but also into the future. Remember that these manifestos are for the next 4 years. And so it's important to think of them also within that long term. Having said so, I think one thing that I find that it might be there in pieces, but not in a coherent manner that I would have wished, is how a kind of a framework that links or incorporates the oil and gas sector, or if you like, the extractive sector generally, into our long-term national development, kind of a framework to give us an idea of where this country is going in terms of its extractive sector. I find that a little bit missing. There are bits and pieces in all the manifestos, but a coherent national socio-economic planning vision that maximizes employment and also industrial development in a very transparent manner for the country, and how the extractive sector sits within that. That's one thing that I found missing, and I think that there's an opportunity to take, which is the 40-year development process that is currently ongoing. As Amin said, despite the disagreements that we hear, if you look at the manifestos clearly, there are areas of agreement. And so there's a possibility to build some kind of a national consensus around the areas of agreement into a certain long-term national development vision for this country, so that it wouldn't matter which party is in power. There will be a very clear vision that the country will be following. That's what I found a little bit missing. A bits and pieces is there, but we can talk about that later.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think you also have a microphone close to you, Mr. Jakumhine. So that's his verdict, broad, general verdict on it. He wants to see a process, or articulation of oil and gas issues within a certain broad national framework. He's seen enough of that to convince him. What about you? What's
It's getting smaller and smaller. And if we still continue to talk about 4 priority areas, we may end up in the same situation 4 years from now. I think we should still be focusing, and we should be doing fewer things with the oil money so that we'll see a lot of impact in the next. So generally, this is my initial impression, but I would expect to see a lot more. And of course, you don't expect everything to be in a manifesto, but to be able to hold them to their word, it would be better to put some numbers and say that we will do this by a certain time frame, and then we can go back and say that you didn't do that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Awatre, your own take on what you've read and seen in the manifestos of all the political parties so far, NDC, MPP, CPP?
All right, thank you, Evans. Like everything, there's some good things and not so good things. I think some of the good things relate to the promotion of renewable energy. A lot of the parties talk about that. The idea of a distributed energy, rooftop solar, things of that sort, which a lot of other countries are adopting. A couple of the manifestos talk about energy conservation. Ishmael talked about it. Question of how much commitment and how much of the how may be missing. I think only one manifesto talked about governance, which I thought was really quite important. We talked about fuel security and a few other things like that. What I generally took away is
and whether we are being shortchanged through transfer pricing and all the fiscal schemes that sometimes companies adopt, and also how we use the money. How we use the money, because the problem with Ghana in terms of oil revenue now is not transparency about accounting for the money.
You raised a very important point, and I think just to move the conversation on, that point about how to use the money, if you look at the manifestos, and Doc mentions this, all the parties propose what to do about it. In fact, the MPP is very specific about using the money. And if you don't mind, so that I can move the conversation, I'll come back to you on this very important. Ishmael, I want to bring you on this, because you made the point when we started about the fact that you've not seen enough targeting of some of the policies, if they are not specific enough. But on this point about revenue usage, the parties are pretty specific, aren't they? Because if you look at the MPP, they're talking about, and they give you a period, 2017 to 2020, the primary focus, expenditure from the oil revenues on infrastructure, health, education, and agriculture. If you read the NDC's manifesto, they talk about diversifying sources of funding for the NHIS. They want to allocate money from the ABFA for that. CPP also talks about, social development. I mean, does it satisfy the concern, address the concern that you raised earlier?
Well, it does. And in fact, the MPP actually talks about a railway line to connect the south into the northern Ghana. For some of us in civil society, we've been advocating for that for some time now. And we've been talking about having a flagship project. And I heard myself saying a couple of times that if I were to be the Minister of Finance, I would say that I'll connect the southern part of this country to the northern part of this country. Why? Because most of the money that, for example, if you look at the ABFA money as utilized over the past 6 years, the bulk had gone into the highest expenditure has been the Accra-Kumasi Trunk Road. A lot of money went into the bypasses, the Nsawam bypass, as well as the Nkoko bypass. That's the highest so far. That road, if you take that road right now, is deteriorating. It's going bad again. This is asphalt road. Okay, why is it so? It is because the heavy trucks from Burkina Faso going up north, they are all using the road very, very intensively. If we were to cut that out and we resort to rail transport, I think it would be a good thing. My worry is that if you look at our needs and the fact that we don't seem to have money to meet our needs, if we are not careful, we'll continue to use the money in an attempt to solve all our needs at the same time.
You think the manifestos do that? They suggest that might happen?
At least if MPP wants to do that, I will support that, because I think we can get the legacy project that we were talking about. The others, but apart from that, they go to talk about 4 other areas, okay? NDC talked about national health insurance. I think it will be interesting to know how much of that, what percentage they intend sending to the national health insurance. Because if you look at the health sector, it's perhaps one of the least sectors that have benefited from the oil money. So far, if you look at the 5-6 years, only about less than 3 million Ghana cedis has gone into the health sector. So it will be useful to know exactly how much we intend sending to that area. But I hold the view that just because the law says that we should select a maximum of 4 priority areas doesn't mean that we should go for 4 priority areas.
The MPP suggests that they want to review the law, the Petroleum Management Act, in their manifesto. It's one of the things they want to do, so that sort of focus.
I think so. If that's possible, let's look at that. But we are faced with a situation where now we know the quantum of money we are likely to get. So we shouldn't be building castles in the air. Let's get realistic and let's decide that, look, we can get maximum $300 million US in a year, $400 million in a year. If you look at the price forecast, we're not going to do as well as we did in give a very crude example. If we want to build ourselves a new airport because we don't like Oteka, that would be good, okay? Because the money can't do everything. So why do we attempt to use the money to do everything? So in terms of how we've utilized the money for the past 5 years, 6 years, PIAC has been talking about it, and I think that's an indictment. PIAC, nobody seems to be listening to PIAC. One disappointment I have with all the parties, I expected somebody to have mentioned how they will strengthen PIAC. Okay, I expected opposition parties to latch on how maybe the ruling government, everybody's complaining that PIAC has been under-resourced. Why is nobody hitting that? So PIAC needs to be resourced. That's a fact. PIAC, I was a pioneering member of PIAC. For 3 years, PIAC couldn't work as they ought to because there was no money to do that, okay? And now there is a law, there's a revision of the law that says that PIAC is going to be funded directly through the ABFA. Go check with PIAC. When was the last time they received a release? We are in October. Okay, so PIAC has to be empowered. Before anybody starts thinking about revising the law, let's make sure that those that are already in the law are being enforced. PIAC needs money, and nobody can run away from that fact. But I can also see why, if you're a government, you don't want to give PIAC money. Okay, even if you have the will, it is not in your best interest to put a gun in your enemy's hand to shoot at you. So whatever you can do to make it impossible for the person who is supposed to be providing the oversight to do that is to find a way of stifling them.
Are you saying it's deliberate?
I wouldn't say that because I don't know what goes on in cabinet.
Sounds very much like that's what you're saying.
But what I'm trying to say is that I have been part of PIAC. Okay, since its inception. We're part of the people who fought for PIAC to be in the law. And I am not happy the way PIAC has been handled and treated so far. We go about talking about, we are quick to cite how we've created PIAC, but we don't talk about how we have not allowed PIAC to work. And for me, I think the opposition parties missed that. They should go back and revise their notes and promise PIAC that they're going to give them more money to do their work, because that's very, very important. If there's a way in which that money to PIAC can come off the top of the money and it wouldn't go through the Ministry of Finance before they decide how much they should give, let's look at that. Because what we're doing right now is that even though PIAC will submit a budget, it depends on how much money we have. So let's strengthen the institutions that we already have. I think the idea of strengthening the revenue authority is a good idea, because there are a few times that you realize that you're not too sure whether GRA, for example, is very well equipped to do the value for money edits, auditing the cost of all these oil companies, whether they have the skill set to do all of that. I know they are all trying to build their skill set, but let's strengthen those that we have. Let's make sure that we having done this for 5 years, we take a step back. Recently there was a press release that a couple of us, Kite, ISEP, and CDD, we issued. What we're calling for is that don't let us rush into setting the new priorities, because if the minister had read the budget, he would have been forced to set the priorities. Because the law says that after 3 years, you can decide new set of priorities or retain the existing ones. We advocated that if it's possible, let's stop, put a hold on that for now, and let's take a step back and ask ourselves whether we are happy with what we've done so far, and then say that, okay, based on that, we're going to do things differently. Interestingly, anytime you raise this issue, the Minister of Finance will say, oh, we will do it. We're going to focus it better. And then only for you to see the list of projects as tall as you can imagine. So
have the manifestos focused it better?
Well, what the manifestos are doing now is that the maximum 4, they've satisfied that. So nobody, you can't for them. They say they will do education, health, infrastructure, agri modernization.
But that's the MPP. I mean, what about the NDC?
Well, because NDC already, they don't need to tell us how they want to use their money, because we know how they've used it. They probably don't need to spend time on that. What I wanted them to have done would have said that, okay, having done this for 5 years, we are hoping that we'll do things differently. The last time we did a presentation, the budget hearing, we were assured by the Deputy Minister of Finance that at the government level, at parliament level, at cabinet level, they're really considering spending the money on fewer projects. So they've only talked about the health insurance. So maybe only about, let's say, 10% of the money will go into health insurance. The rest, probably they will focus on some legacy project. But they are quite silent on that. And I'm not too happy they didn't use the opportunity to say that after 5 years, we have learned these lessons and we're going to do things differently.
Okay, thank you. And there's a very important point you've made about the revenues, how we are spending it, etc., etc. But also, I mean, the oil and gas sector also provides an opportunity for the power sector. They're interlinked. As we talk about the revenues and how we spend it, what about the gas that we need to power plants? I mean, that's also a very important part of the equation. If you read all the reset down on our power crisis and why we are having the challenges, a huge part of that is lack of supply of, added financial challenges that then allows impossible for us to get what we need to power plants or something else, somewhere there related. Mr. Wache, you said earlier when we started that you thought the most important challenge we have, which is the recurring power crisis, you haven't seen enough in the manifestos to you that they are at root causes. I read the manifestos, and I must say that sounds to me pretty recycled stuff that we've read over and over again. It starts by telling you all the megawatts that will be introduced and the timelines to meet them. Well, we know that in the past, and in fact, all the parties are guilty of this if you read the manifestos through. All of them have missed targets. The MPP famously set a 31st September deadline that we all remember. There's the 31st September in the calendar. The NDC developed an energy policy. And most people forget this, but they state, and I want to quote this directly from that policy, signed by an NDC, Mr. T.A.J., I think, when he was a power minister, says, the goals of the power subsector, and this is the policy, are to increase installed power generation capacity quickly from about 2,000 megawatts today, and this was in 2009 when they came to power, to 5,000 megawatts by 2015. We are in 2016. We are nowhere near that. Now, go to their manifesto. Now, they've shown 5,000 megawatts. They want to achieve that now by 2021. So I ask you, do you have the same feeling as I do, that both parties pretty recycled stuff and really not addressing? We might return to the problems we're having now if we're going to go with the manifestos they put out on addressing the power crisis.
I don't think that there has been a sufficient address of the financial issues. I mean, you talked about the targets shifted, and the targets always move. I mean, the perspective we should have today is that we have a capacity of 3,500 megawatts. The country is using about 2,000 megawatts. So we have 1,500 megawatts of extra power. We have it installed. And yet, different days, different times, large parts of the population don't get power. Ask yourself why. I would argue that really the challenges that face the power sector today are not about megawatts. They're not about generation. They're about money. And they're about, of course, there are a number of issues that contribute to that, but I think primarily, what are those financial solutions that are being devised to address the problems we have today? If you follow the newspapers, the banks just came up with a $500 million plan to restructure some of VRA's loans. Well, guess what? VRA has another $1 billion of loans and receivables that need to be addressed that they have no plan for today. $1 billion more than 500 that need to be addressed. Nobody talks about that. When you think of the losses that ECG incurs operationally every day, I think only one party talks about restructuring ECG. But that has been the talk of the community for months. I mean, if you read the papers, there's Millennium Challenge and there's MEDA, there's ECG staff workers going on strike because they don't want it privatized. Why don't they want it privatized? Because ECG's losses are over 35%, close to 40%, depending on the day. Every dollar of investment that goes into this sector, well, we lose anywhere from 35 to 40% of it. It just vanishes into thin air. And you have to ask yourself, how do you maintain a sector with those kinds of operational losses? Well, the answer is you don't. So, for the parties, what are we doing to address those issues? And I think only one talks about restructuring those losses. And I think finally, it comes down to the issues of governance. Because you've got to ask, back to Evans, your point, isn't this sort of recycled? It's very easy to come up with targets. Today we want 5,000, we need it in 2021, we need it in 2025. Well, there are a couple of questions about how we're going to get that in the first place when I owe over $1 billion. Who's going to provide that when you're very silent on how private sector participation should participate? We don't know from the manifestos. But really, to create a sustainable sector, it's all about making sure there's liquidity in the sector, about being able to buy the crude oil when you need it. We talk about fuel security. We talk about building LNG projects, which is great. How are they going to be built? I think one of the manifestos talks about a pipeline that's going to be built from west to east. Why would you build that pipeline when you owe the Nigerians $200 million, and because you haven't paid them, they're not supplying you gas? So I would contend that the manifestos haven't spent enough time addressing those root financial issues that are causing today's problems. And they're not addressing enough. I think the MPP talked about governance most clearly, and I thought it was quite well articulated. How are the actors going to resolve the issues around them? Are they going to do it in their present form? Are they going to do it in a restructured form? Are they going to do it in a private sector form? I think these are the questions in terms of the instrumentality of policies that I think we would like to see in the manifesto.
If I read this to you, Ms. Awachi, develop and implement an energy sector financial restructuring recovery plan, incorporating a liquidity management mechanism for VRA, ECG, Northern, NED, and BDCs. Does that address any of the things that you're hoping that it will address? Does that touch it at all? And this, by the way, is what the MPP said they will do. I mean, when it comes to the financial part, I must say that I didn't find anything from the NDC on that, anything categorical from the NDC on that. I mean, the MPP that talks about the financial side. But does that, at least from the MPP, address that root cause of the challenge?
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, it was a shame that CPP said nothing about the financial issues, and NDC didn't say anything about the financial issues, which surprised me as well. NPP was the only manifesto that addressed it, but I suppose what would have been additionally good is if they had really highlighted the severity of the problem, and I would argue that it's really quite a severe problem when your state entities owe close to $2 billion and you don't know how you're going to pay for them.
Yeah, please, Mr. Kuyole, go on.
Yeah, I come back to this financial thing, but I wanted to say something, take you a little back on the revenue thing. I like the grand projects idea, and coming from the northern part of the country, I would love to have a railway line from Paga to Accra. However, I think the challenge is this on that one. Look, it's been 5 years. We know that currently oil revenue, a la Jubilee, is just 4% of GDP. It's 5% of domestic revenue minus loans and everything. And as at December last year, was just $3.2 billion. We know that. We know that for 2015, the total oil revenue that came to government of Ghana was just about 1.45 billion Ghana cedis. We know that for a fact. So a simple Google search will tell you that if you want to do a railway line from Paga through Kumasi to Accra, you'll be spending no less than $5 billion. So this is like more than 5 years of your oil production revenue at current levels.
Sankofa will come on board very soon.
So, yeah, Sankofa will come on board. But it's this to mean that NPP is going to spend all the money on this railway line and not do anything else because they have also put other things there.
Good
I'm
question.
talking here about being realistic. And so let's interrogate these positions with some realism because we have the figures. Now, we don't know the future, but at least over the last 5 years, we know what has come in.
And it's a very important point to make because in the NPP, there's so many things they want to do with the oil.
You know why this is so important?
I mean,
because these
infrastructure, health,
2016
education,
elections, Madame Charlotte Osei has told us she needs 1.2 billion Ghana cedis to run this election. This is almost like total oil revenue for 2015, which was 1.45 billion. So your oil revenue for an entire year can just literally run one election. So let's be real here, what the oil revenue can do and what it cannot do.
So, I mean, this is interesting you say, because if you look at all the parties, the NPP, the NDC, is the only party that is pretty careful in outlining too many projects and stuff they want to use the money for. I guess maybe they are in power, so they know what they are getting. And so they are pretty careful in saying, apart from the NHIS, they're pretty thin on how exactly they're going to spend the money. Maybe they know what you're saying, and that's why that is the case. But the NPP is pretty, they want to spend a lot of money from the energy sector. But the point is, and that's to you, where's the money? Why are they going to get the money to do all the things they want to do? I mean, do we believe this in the manifesto?
Hello. Yeah. Okay, I'm not an NPP man, so I will leave the party.
You're doing an analytical job on
exactly.
this, so feel free.
So I hope
be as candid as possible, though.
I hope they will.
Don't let them intimidate you with their big suits. Let's just go straight to the point.
Let me tell you what I'm saying. What I thought I was saying. You know, yes, the oil money is almost equivalent to the budget for our elections, but if we were to use that argument, we wouldn't have built a gas processing plant. When we decided to
borrowed.
Exactly. And we borrowed it against oil money.
We are mortgaging oil. Some say
exactly.
That's wrong.
So no, the point I'm making is that money, we can also decide to take that money and give all the money to Electoral Commission and say, look, that's also our need. Use it to run the elections. There will be no money left. All that I'm saying is that even if it's not a railway line and it's something else, that we can, you see, one problem with the way we're spending the oil money now is the fact that it's not even used to finance one project. So if there are 10 projects, the oil money is doing 10%, 10%, 10% of each of those projects.
Isn't that the problem with the manifesto promises?
No.
They want to do everything with the little money.
So if I read what them people were saying carefully, they said they were going to use the oil money to leverage private sector financing to fund that railway project. It's in that manifesto. They said they're going to use the oil money to leverage.
So similar to what happened with the gas infrastructure.
Exactly. And I'm saying that if it's going to take us 10 years to pay for the cost of a railway line, and I know we'll have the oil for at least another 15 years. Okay, so if we decide to say that that's what, as a nation, we want to do, I support that. We don't need to have the money. In any case, we are borrowing anyway against projects. Okay, so if we be able to do something we call flagship legacy project, let's go for that. The money as it is now is not enough. By the time we took that decision to build a gas processing plant, we hadn't even received up to $500 million US. But we were able to borrow $1 billion to do that project. If we decide that as a national priority, I think we should do it. But the MPP didn't say that they're going to use only the oil money. They said they're going to use the oil money to leverage. So I think that's a clarification. But to talk about the power, the power sector, I agree fully with Mr. Awatri. We all seem to know what the problem is, but we are not taking the bold steps to tackle what the issues are. That's why I'm saying that if we continue to produce electricity that we waste, ultimately, we wouldn't be able to meet our demand. Even there's something that you probably didn't see as well from the NEC manifesto. The NEC had promised that in 2015, the access to national electrification, it was 2020, they brought it forward in 2015. Yeah. Now, they're saying that the access target is by 2025. The original target was 2020. Now, because of their experience, they know that we can't do it by 2020. So now it's 2025, but this target was not even set by NDC, it was set by PNDC in 1989, that by 2020, there will be universal access for all Ghanaians. Now, NDC had brought it forward in 2015, just like the 5,000 megawatt. Now they're saying by 2025. Okay, so that's another promise that we probably are not seeing it materialize. But it's all because we don't have the money most of the time to do some of the things. Let's take the gas that we're talking about, for example. For some time now, we have known that we needed more gas as a people. We know that Jubilee gas wasn't enough. We know that 10 project was coming on stream. We know that there was associated gas with a 10 project. We've completed the project, and now we are planning to invest into the pipeline that will bring the gas off the 10 fields. And the moment we realize that the Jubilee will be shut down next year, we said we're fast-tracking that project. You wonder why, what planning went into that. We probably should have thought about that right from the beginning, because mind you, we started producing oil for about 4 or 5 years before we were able to commercialize our gas from Jubilee. We're flaring the gas. We were in a situation where we can have stranded gas in the Western Corridor, and there are no gas in Tema. Okay, because there's no pipeline, we could easily have done an intertie. Now we're saying that we're not going to tie in the pipelines, we're going to construct our own gas pipeline. So long as it's going to take us to finish that project, there could be a situation where there will be stranded gas in the Western Corridor, where probably we don't need them there, but we don't have gas in Tema, where there are other plants. So it talks about taking a holistic view of the problems that we have and making sure that once we're doing something else, let's think about the other implications. The sector, most of the entities are broke.
And to a question just on what you're saying, to bring us back to our conversation. So having raised that challenge, do you see in the manifestos any clear proposal to address that challenge?
No, and
both NDC and PPM in the CPP.
Yes,
you don't see that.
Maybe they can't do that in a manifesto.
Why can't they?
Okay, so maybe there's so much they can put in a manifesto. But you see, I read how NDC had diagnosed the problem in the power sector. You need to read that. They wouldn't admit that we had a problem. They said, well, historically, we've known that we have a problem. Okay, so we are going to take a bold decision to deal with the problem. And then they go on the same strategies, the same commission of power plant. I don't see that in any
Okay,
of them.
let me go to Mr. Wachu on this. Mr. Wachu, so that's an important point he's making. But both parties, though, talk about fuel security, which is a very important part of the conversation. Because the power plants are there, you need to power them with something. You need to power them with fuel. Most often than not, all of them are talking about LNG. NDC says they're going to build an LNG infrastructure to ensure continuous supply of natural gas at power plants. They're going to complete a 150 km reverse flow, I think that's what you're talking about, pipeline from Boise Power Enclave to facilitate the transmission of dense gas to Tema. That addresses part of your challenge, does it not? Because that's what the NDC is saying, but I want to put that question to Mr. Archer. MPP says similar. They also want to leverage natural gas as a long-term source central to the operation of the power sector. When it comes to fuel, security for the power plants that we have you seen enough in these manifestos to convince you that in the next 4 years we will get there?
Well, if you mentioned two of the manifestos, NDC talks about LNG and MPP also talks about LNG. And I think the idea of having liquefied natural gas is a good idea to complement our current sources of gas. Having said that, back to an ongoing conversation we're having, VRA owes the Nigerians close to $200 million for unpaid bills. VRA hasn't paid Ghana Gas for any of the gas it supplied, and that bill is over $350 million. So buying gas for fuel security, we have unpaid bills of over $500 million. Nobody has talked about how we will address that problem. How are we going to build the LNG? How are we going to sustain gas supply? When you look across to Nigeria, well, they have all this gas and very little gas supply. Why? Because they're not getting paid. Guess what's happening here in Ghana? How are we going to get fuel security if we're not paying the gas suppliers? We don't. And I think only NPP mentions the need for the liquidity solution to address that, but CPP is silent and NDC is also silent.
Okay. Nicola, please, yes, go ahead, and then I'll now come to my audience. And there are a few more things I'd like to get your take on, but we can do that as we interact with the audience, which is GMPC restructuring. Both parties agreed that something needs to be done about it. In fact, the MPP made a bold claim they want to move the headquarters to the GMPC to the Western region. Also, another important point, they are refineries. Both MPP and NDC say they'll build new refineries. In fact, the MPP said they'll build it in the Western region. NDC said they'll build it right close to where the toll is. Whether that's right for us or not is a debatable question. But yes, your own take on the conversation so far, and I'll move on to my audience.
No, I just wanted to again say that I think it's a very important point on the financial issues that Mr. Awachu raised. And, you cannot address a financial crisis when you don't know where the money is going to come from. And I think that's one issue that all the manifestos, in my view, did not really look at critically. Maybe, as Ishmael said, it's in some other documents that we don't have access to. But I think that going forward, there needs to be some very bold decision to say, we need to be able to, from a certain given date going forward, to be able to have full cost of generation, transmission, and distribution. And then to do that, we have to make sure that the entire system is very competitive. And so I think the point here, if it has not been done, the parties need to take this very seriously so that we don't have this problem recurring again. On the LNG situation, I think, I've been looking at it also, and my sense is that, LNG is quite expensive than domestic gas. And so I was just wondering why the emphasis on LNG instead of our domestic gas, the Jubilee, and what we expect from 10, and also the Sankofa. Why don't we prioritize that, and then we can think about LNG, because there are a lot of issues around the LNG, but of course, there are no details in here. So,
Ms. Alchiwano has had some reaction to that, and also you, Ishmael.
Sure. I mean, the simple answer to why I think the country ought to look at LNG, from my opinion, is that our domestic sources of gas are insufficient. I mean, even after Sankofa and 10, I don't think the country will produce more than, 400 million cubic feet a day, possibly. Whereas in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll need, 600-700 million. The real question is whether we can get more gas from Nigeria, but if we're not paying our bills, the answer is no. So LNG, the other thing about LNG is that it's decoupled from location, and it's traded internationally. So there are world prices for it, and you can get it from anywhere. And it doesn't matter whether there's a crisis in Nigeria, there's a turret broken in Ghana or not. So it's a good backup. So I think from that point of view, that's my view about LNG.
Because if we don't have LNG, the alternative is light crude. So even though LNG is a little bit more expensive than domestic gas, it's also cheaper than light crude. So in terms of energy security, it would be a good thing to have the facility. All we're talking about is a regasification facility that allows us to be able to import LNG and regasify it as and when we need them. So the facility could be there, and I think we need that. It's long overdue. Since 2010, we've been talking about that. The feasibility study has been conducted by the Energy Commission. We're still sitting down, not doing anything. So, and this is something that the private sector can just come in and invest, provided we guarantee that we'll pay them. And that's a problem. We haven't addressed the fundamental problem. If Ghana Gas were to be owned by any private entity, they would have shut supply to VRA by now. $350 million is, and they are talking about it. There's
not more than 5 years. So we've moved way ahead of many countries. So we are not basically running away from the fact that there are challenges. But then let me say also that on the issue of accountability, there's a question as to whether if we don't strengthen PIAC, then accountability can't happen. The Parliament of Ghana is the main institution for oversight of the public purse. And the laws that are passed, indeed, to take money from the public purse, you have to, on a regular basis, go to Parliament for approval. So even if PIAC is not strengthened, and I want to insist that government is not targeting PIAC, not trying to emaciate PIAC because it doesn't want PIAC to function. It is a clear case of inadequacy of public funds. But then I want to add that the intention is not to stifle PIAC, but to assure that other systems of accountability come into play. I think basically I just want to add this to then let me also correct the impression that we know how much money we are going to earn next year. The pricing of oil, and as we've experienced in the past year, has suggested to us that it's so unpredictable. So we don't want to load too many things, and indeed, we want to even contest the issue about this legacy project. Indeed, you depend on rates of return before you put down any. There are alternative means of transporting goods. If we are not using the roads, we are creating opportunity for using water transport. We are creating opportunities for using an alternative route. You need to ensure that you don't spend too much money on an infrastructure that would not give you the returns in the times that you're talking about.
Thank you. Ms. Okwe? Ms. Okwe, the Deputy Communications Director of the MPP. You want to say a few words in reaction to what you've heard?
Yes, thank you very much. And also for the, I'll want to use the doctor style. When I get up, finish, I'll introduce myself properly. But yes, for the benefit of some of the foreign faces and so on that I'm seeing here, I've also worked in the energy sector as part of my legal career. So it's an area that we're very conversant with. I would want to quickly correct an impression, talking about my brothers on the other side stating more than 5,000 and so on. We all saw the 2012 advert by the far side, which said they were going to give us 5,000 megawatts, and it has not been achieved. It doesn't matter. It's okay. Sometimes you set a target, you're not able to get to it, but don't dribble us by telling us that you were saying something different. In fact, this was supposed to have been achieved by 2016, and now it's being extended. So the panel was quite right to say that the goalpost has been shifted. Didn't you watch the Far Side advert? I think so, yeah. So everybody's watched that. So that is one thing. Now, we in the MPP, we've realized that with regards to the energy sector, especially pertaining to the power sector, the issue is finance. And we've always reiterated that the so-called doomsday solution is temporary because this is a financial issue that is not sustainable. And that is why we put in various clauses and issues to deal with the finances of how this should be done. We have looked at, and I just wanted to correct something you also mentioned about we saying we're going to build a refinery in the Western region. I think that was NDC. We're actually going to expand the Tema oil refinery because we feel that it is an area that if the margins were smaller, then we can increase productivity to make sure that we get more with regard to that.
It's rather the MPP that said they'll refurbish the Tema. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Tema oil refinery.
And expand the Tema oil refinery, correct? That's the NDC's point.
No, we are saying that we are going to expand the Tema oil refinery.
They said that.
No, they talked about Western region.
No, they didn't talk about Western region.
Please hold on, let me just open our manifesto and tell you what we said.
They didn't talk about the Western region.
We're all learning. We'll put it here straight away. Now, we said, if you look at page 45 of our manifesto, petroleum downstream, point C, NPP, expand the Tema oil refinery and ensure boss refer, blah, blah, blah. So that is what we have said specifically we're going to do. So if you check that page of the manifesto. But moving on to the other matters, I think that the advice that we've also taken is that with regard to the Right to Information Bill, that there were a few retrogressive areas in there. I must say that we haven't really looked at that in detail, and I can promise the panel that the MPP would look at that because I think we can only always improve upon what we intend to do. So I'd like to thank the panel for that. With regard to transparency, we are of the opinion that as much as Parliament has an oversight role, PIAC would also be able to assist Parliament to achieve this. Parliament usually ends up being a sort of rubber stamp because of the fact that they want to catch the eye of the executive. And we realize that what we would have to do is to adequately fund PIAC so that they'll be more independent and be able to deal with such matters well. PIAC has given us some revelations in the last 2 years that were astronomical and surprising. So we want to say that we'll look at that in terms of advising ourselves to improve on that. For lack of time, there are lots of things we would have wanted to talk about. I made a few notes with regard to the issue of cost, our energy blend in terms of the per kilowatt hour. I think we are not competitive, so it's something that we would want to look at. For example, the issue of waste through transmission is something that we find mind-boggling in terms of how we are dealing with that. And it's something that the MPP would like to look at. In fact, we'll be very happy to consult some of the very experts in any part of the industry so that the waste is minimized.
And briefly, so that I can engage at that.
So, as you see, there's a problem why we couldn't put everything also in our manifesto. So, in a nutshell, we are most grateful that this analysis has been done, and we would add a few tips to what we put here. Thank you very much.
Let me see by hands also. I'll come back to you, Dr. Haji, but let me.
Thank you very much.
Let me engage more hands. You don't want to talk now, so I see a hand there. I see a hand there. My friend, Mr. Dogbevi there. No. They said they will speak as and when Yes, so I'll grant them that. So can we get a microphone to the gentleman? Okay, let's give Mr. Dubi. Yes. Kindly make it brief so that we run out of time. We will be wrapping up very shortly.
Thank you very much. My name is Emmanuel Dugbevi. I work for Ghana Business News. My concern is with accountability. It's stated clearly in the law what the petroleum money should be used for. And we saw in a clear case of the branding of the buses, a clear violation of the law regarding how the money should be used. And when the matter came up, the Attorney General was asked to investigate. And it came out clearly after the investigation that the people had breached the law. And to date, nobody has been penalized. So, if we don't make enough money from petroleum, and the money is not being used, even though we claim the law has stated where the money should be kept, and yet the monies are not being properly used, what do the political parties intend to do in the future in the light of the violations that have been committed in the past and have not been penalized? What do they intend to do in the future to make sure that there are no violations in regards to using the petroleum revenue? Because it's one way the monies have been wasted, not being used for the properly established legal boundaries for which they are expected to be used. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get my panel to respond to all that, but let me just get more of the views there. I see a hand. No, you, Rokoto. Let me hear from my friend in the corner there.
Thank you. I'm Fred. I have a question on the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. Dr. Haji mentioned that NDC has created the act so that the allocation of the funds will be good. I don't know, but the Heritage Fund, how much are we making on the Heritage Fund? The money is sitting at the Bank of Ghana. We are making less than even 0.5% returns for the future generation. I don't know how that money is being invested. I am very happy that they are saying, or MPP is saying that they are going to amend the law. I pray that they should consider and probably set a trust where they will be independent to really manage the fund, because today TB rate is even how much? So if we put money in the account where we are making less than 0.5% return on the money, I don't think we are really managing money. I also have a small issue on the EMP. Very briefly. Yeah, sure. The new EMP, act that has come. I understand that the Minister of Energy have power to veto on the when there is a competitive bidding.
Competitive tendering
yes,
process.
this is what I'm saying. So, in the case where he vetoes, he has 1 month period to make it known to Ghanaians, to publish. What I'm saying is that before the minister vetoes, he should have a reason for vetoing. And so just within a week, I don't see why it should take the minister 1 month to make it known to the Ghanaians how and the reasons why.
So in other words, you want the party manifesto to be clear on this?
all these things must be.
I see a gentleman right beside you had a hand up. Yes.
My name is Luther Bright from UPSA Graduate School. Banks have come out clearly to state their position to support the oil and gas industry. And currently, interest rates are averaging around 35 to 40%. And I don't see the party's manifesto telling us about how they are going to reduce the interest rate so that the banks can better partner the private sector. We all know that oil and gas is a capital-intensive area. I didn't also see exploration policy, development plan, or production, or even decommissioning strategy on the various manifestos. And lastly, FOCs have almost taken over almost all our downstream oil and gas. And I didn't see anything about in the manifestos about how they are going to help our...
I need to come to this aisle. Can I get a microphone to this aisle? If I see a lady, I'll select the lady instead, because I want gender balance in the conversation. But I don't see a lady's hand up, so I'll take it to another gentleman. Please, as a gentleman there beside the lady. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Nanapoku. Good evening. My name is Nanapoku. I did not hear anything about the toll debt, because if you all remember, that was one area that the NDC made a lot of fuss about when they came to power. And they haven't told us how much they have paid so far, how much is left, and all the parties also mention it as to how they're going to treat that very debt, because we need to come back to work.
Okay. Thank you. There's a gentleman right beside you who had a hand up.
Thank you very much. My name is Asante Dako. I only want to bring some information. I heard one of the panelists give the ECG systems losses at 35 to 40%. Fortunately, I have the latest figures, and I just want to bring clarity to that. It's 22.53%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Unless I see a female's hand, I'm sorry, we need to move on. A CPP voice in the conversation so far? No CPP hand. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my panel and wrap up. So we've seen questions and contributions. Of course, we began with the parties reacting to all that you said. The toll debt. Some people were. He was surprised that he didn't see enough in the manifesto on that. The exploration plan, and Mr. Kuhl, I think you have this. We have an issue with how we are going now in terms of the exploration and the capacity of a lot of the agencies awarded contracts, and that your fear is you might be running out of oil in the ground very quickly unless we put a lot of focus on exploring and giving contracts to people who have the capacity, who can explore and help us produce more. And there's also a question about the EMP bill and the powers it gives to the minister, and of course dealing with there's another corruption in the sector. It's another question that we heard about. Mr. Lugbe mentioned that what has happened to those who've misapplied monies from oil and gas. He mentioned the bus rebranding. Your quick take on all that, then I'll pass it on to the other experts.
Okay, so I'll start with the exploration production bit. I think the concern I've been raising for some time now is that, of course, the manifestos have touched on this, but I think it's an area that we need to pay a lot of attention to, because as we know in the industry, it takes between 5 to 7 years from exploration to development. Now we have Jubilee, 2010 we started production. 10 will come on board, came on board 2016. Hopefully Sankofa should come on board by 2018. What next is the question. What next? So the point is that even if we started exploration today, by 2021, we are not likely to bring on board a new production. And so if you look at some estimates that some groups have done, include Wood and McKenzie, the expectation is that if we don't do anything, we don't do any discoveries now to add to what we already have, by 2021, we would have already gotten to plateau and start a decline. So the issue about whether it's the Voltaire or NIC, all the parties talk about this, is very important, that we don't get ourselves to a point where by 2021, we are already starting talking about decline. Because right now we have Jubilee, we know that we have 10, Sankofa will come on board. What next is the big question. And that's the point I've been making. On the transparency, the accountability issue, yes, I agree with you. I think that, as I said in the beginning, there's a bit relatively some transparency in our system. We can improve on it. But what we actually want is not transparency. It's accountability. That's what citizens want. So the focus of the parties or the next government should be on accountability, so that if monies goes to wrong hands, projects goes to the wrong people, people are punished. And I think that's one of the challenges we have in our public financial management system. It's the will to be able to punish people deliberately or somehow find a mean to fall foul of the law. And that's where I think the gap is that we need to. My last point would be on the heritage and the stabilization fund. I think that this was very deliberate. If you ask me, it's a good thing. As whether the money should be invested locally, you need to understand that there is a reason why we are not investing the money locally. And to be able to invest the money locally, we need to address a couple of issues. First of all, what kinds of instruments should we invest in? Even that, do we have the absorptive capacity? That's the problem, that to absorb this money. How do we insulate this money from going into cronies and people we don't want the money to go to? And so it's more than just saying that we should bring the money and invest. At least there's one thing that has happened. And this is not to say I am all for the sinking fund that the finance minister created, because it had a downside on the stabilization fund. Because the essence of the stabilization fund was for us to build it up so that on a rainy day we'll be able to take some money. But the finance minister, by capping it, introducing the cap, succeeded cumulatively to put about 400 million into the sinking fund. However, what the sinking fund did was to help us pay down some of the debts. So if you look at the Moody's rating recently, a lot of it had to, a lot of the factors they considered was what was happening in the sinking fund. So I think that we so far it has worked, but I think going into the future, I haven't seen the parties, apart from the MPP, talking about reviewing the law. It's been 5 years. We need to ask ourselves a very fundamental question. Has the PRMA served the purpose for which it was established? If the answer is no, then we do some fundamental reforms. If it is yes, then we carry on.
Okay, Ishmael?
Thank you, Evans. It's interesting the way politicians will always react, and I admire them for that. When my big brother, Dr. Ampofu, is wearing a different hat, his doctoral hat, he argues differently. The truth of the matter is that I think some of us commented way back in 2010. We had the opportunity to review a policy for the Energy Commission. We said that 5,000 target wasn't achievable. In fact, we didn't need that. If we were looking at the power pool, then there was a case for that. But the projected demand, we didn't need the 5,000. We knew we weren't going to achieve that, so we're not surprised we didn't achieve. But what I find a bit intriguing and surprising is Dr. Haji's response that is not just the PIAC, but Parliament has ultimate oversight. I mean, we've gone past that debate. Parliament itself argued and fought against the PIAC, but now you go and meet any parliamentarian and ask him whether we need a PIAC or not. They actually dependent on PIAC, and sometimes when PIAC goes to meet the finance committee, they're asking PIAC to do the work that they're supposed to be doing. So I think government wouldn't have to tell us. They don't need to tell us they are stifling PIAC. We know when something is being stifled. Okay, so it's if you have priorities, the ones that are most important, you focus on that. One other thing that I think nobody is talking about, and that's why I'm disappointed nobody focused on PIAC as far as transparency and accountability is concerned. PIAC is almost like a toothless bulldog, in the sense that they can only make findings and recommendations. They don't have any power to prosecute anybody. They are supposed to write reports and submit to the presidency and also parliament. And nobody has the power to prosecute. There are a lot of infractions that PIAC, they've reported on. Nothing is, for example, there's some important finding that PIAC keep making. There is some payment that is supposed to have been made by somebody, one of these companies, in respect of surface rental. For 2 years now, the money has gone into that account, but nobody knows. GRA doesn't know who paid the money into that account. The law says that as soon as you pay the money into the account, you have to report to GRA that I have paid money into the account. The money is sitting in there 2 years now, nobody knows. It's an infraction on the law of the law. So PIAC doesn't have any power to, for example, we talked about the bus branding. PIAC doesn't have any power to do anything. So I think going forward, PIAC should be strengthened. If there has to be any revision of the law PR should be given more power. And we also need to make the law such that there is very little room for, people to decide and have too much power to decide how oil money should be used. The framework should be a little bit tightened so that we'll be able to focus on that. And on the power sector, we cannot attract the needed investment if the status quo is maintained. The situation where the IPPs will come in and they will only come in when government is providing sovereign guarantee, and you have GMPC being asked to provide bonds for the car powers to come in. If the system is a market, if it is not able to pay for itself, government will continue to play a role in the power sector, which we don't need. We need to move away from that.
Mr. Oche, final comments based on what you've heard so far?
Sure. I was happy to hear from my friend at presumably ECG to bring us up to date on the system losses. But I want to actually use that to illustrate a point. You know, in 2009, when I joined VRA, those same numbers were around 25%. So in 7 years, we've gone from 25 to 22.5. Now, those numbers don't include the collection of revenue. When you add the collection of revenue, that number goes to 35. And when you include the collection of revenue from government agencies, it's more than 40%. So you have to ask yourself, is this sort of this incremental improvement that we're looking for, or do we want a step change? And I would argue that the citizens want a step change in the improvement of the delivery of service. And the manifestos don't really address that.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the panel of experts. A big round of applause for them. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Oche, Mr. Kuyole, and Ishmael Ajekumhene. And I want to invite Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam to give us the closing remarks, after which we'll bid you farewell. A round of applause for him as he takes the mic.
So all too soon, we have come to the close of our expert panel. This, I believe you agree, has been very insightful discussions, very useful, not just to those of us in this room, but I believe to many Ghanaians outside this room who listen to our experts, but also our audience, and particularly our political parties. What we have done today is another form of holding political parties accountable to their promises. Because if you don't understand what the political parties are promising, when a party is voted into government, you will never be able to hold that party in government accountable. And so from today, those of us who listen to our experts now know that some parties have targets as far as increasing generation capacity. And so we have something we can hold them to. Others are promising to review the Petroleum Revenue Management Law. I believe not just for the sake of reviewing, but also to improve on the governance of petroleum revenues. So we now have something we can hold them to when that party is in government. And this is why I agree with the people who say that manifestos are something like social contracts. It's a social contract between the parties and the governed, so that when they are in government, we can be able to monitor, track them, and be able to ensure that we hold them to their promises. I want to thank our panelists most sincerely for the level of expertise, the level of knowledge and information you have shared. For once, I was sitting there, worried that these discussions do not become partisan. And I'm happy to note that the choice of experts for today's function was excellent, because we listened to knowledge, we listened to expertise, we listened to very useful information. We did not listen to politics. And this is the objective behind the Citizens' Energy Manifesto, that we should not allow the politicians all the time to decide our fate. If you have a politician that is bankrupt of ideas, you can imagine the fate he's going to decide for you. But we also should interact with our politicians. Let's talk to them. Let's speak to them. Let them understand our feeling. And when we are able to have such interaction together, we can fashion out a way, a more sustainable and comprehensive way of addressing our challenges together. Finally, we indicated here that most of our parties have converged as far as some of the policies and programs are concerned, even though they have also diverged in a few cases. What this means is that we can build political consensus in this country on how we can develop our country for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren. We can do that. And so today I am more convinced that we can have political consensus on these policies. The problems will be the same, whether NDC is in power, MPP is in power, CPP is in power. The problems will be the same. It will either be insufficient generation capacity, or fuel supply challenges, or financial challenges. And so the earlier we build consensus on how to address these issues, the better for us. Our parties will just come into government and lead us into implementing these policies. But all of us would have built consensus on the path we want to take. I want to thank you once again for accepting our invitation, and look out to something that will happen after the election. We intend to engage the political parties even more than we have done before, and especially the party that will be elected into government. So all the issues that have been raised here are going to be documented and will be made available to our political parties to support them to improve on their manifesto. If the manifesto cannot be changed, the programs that they will implement as a consequence of the manifesto can be improved upon. So together, we can hold them accountable. So ASAP will continue all the noise after the election. And please, when you hear us, join us, because we all have resolved today that we will hold our parties, when they are in government, accountable to the promises they are making to us. I want to thank Nananum, the President of the National House of Chiefs, and your colleague from Accra. Thank you very much for gracing this occasion and for the remarks that you made. Political parties, thank you very much. Often it's difficult to get political parties when you invite them to programs. But for you to be able to do that, for you to be able to make time to join us today so we can interact, we can engage, we can talk to each other as Ghanaians and confront our challenges together. I want to thank you very much for that. And to all of us audience, members of the media fraternity, I can see Deputy CEO of GNPC, Mr. Thomas Menu. That underscores the relevance of this discussion. I believe we all have learned and we have become richer as Ghanaians. Thank you, and God bless all of us.
Thank you very much. I just want to quickly invite Mohammed to join us, brief closing prayer in the Islamic ways of the tradition. Mohammed, very briefly.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين.
Thank you very much. Bid you farewell. Safe journey back home.
The big